Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock and let's figure out what happened today. It was a pretty wild day to say the least in the markets today with Tesla specifically. So let's go over that. I'll give you my thoughts moving forward, what we can expect next, all that good stuff. So if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. And I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. And of course, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day. These are the different tiers. $3 a month for the first tier, $5 for the second tier. And then $7 for the third tier. The first tier obviously includes Tesla. Again, technical analysis, daily updates, constant updates, blah, 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 options flow. Second tier is NVIDIA with Tesla. Third tier is non-Tesla, non-NVIDIA stocks that I talk about as well. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day flat, pretty much actually. Closing up, I say it like that because it was kind of all over the place today, but pretty much flat, closing up 0.5% on the day, which, compared to the market is a slight outperformance, which is nice to see. But yeah, let's take a zoom in onto the price and see what the hell even happened today, because it was a pretty wild day, right? For the most part, absolutely. So what can we expect, right? What actually happened? So there's a few things that happened, right? So obviously we had Elon on 2 interviews today, right? In case you're wondering what the pumps were, Elon had an interview in the morning, which is the pump that we had right here. And then the sell-off after the interview finished. And then guess what this was? Another interview. And then the sell-off post-interview. It's just like clockwork. But the point is the fact that we had essentially 2 arguably liquidity sweeps. It looks a lot more like a liquidity sweep in the 1 hour, you can see here, without actual candle closures anywhere meaningfully above these levels on the 1 hour time frame. We did get it on the 15-minute time frame, which is a good start. But this is what I was kind of at least trying to guide my members throughout the entire day. A bit of a day trading kind of day almost, honestly. These kind of like liquidity traps that occurred on Tesla stock. And I also mentioned very high similarities with what happened about 2 weeks ago, which I'll go over in this video as well. There's a lot of information to go over this video, but essentially the stock, you can see, after they had that false breakout in the morning, we came right back into the support area from yesterday's high. Really, this was all of yesterday's high, resistance essentially. And then of course came right into it as support, went right back up to the exact same level, and then now we're back once again to the exact same level. We pretty much ping-ponged between these 2 levels pretty aggressively throughout the day, right? At least for the most part. So that's that. But this has issues of a potential liquidity sweep, because you can see this is 2 times now that it price went above the sort of 350 to 352 range just for it to be a massive liquidity sweep, just for the candles to close well below those levels regardless, right? Into a pretty decent sell-off both times, right? So that's a little bit on the more concerning side, right? We're not getting actual closures, which now to me tells me the fact that 15 minutes sometimes is enough, but in this case, I'd want to see at least a 1 hour candle closure now above or below these levels right here. So essentially above 352 roughly, and below pretty much, we'll just say 336 roughly, right? Around there. Those are the levels we want to see. Now, okay, there's a few things to say. The first of which I guess you can say is, I was telling my members that, this was looking good, right? But I also mentioned how, at least on the 15, this one I was saying how it will be most likely a trap, but this one had potential. But I was mentioning how specifically, if we ever lose this 349-ish level right here, and I was telling this to my members how this is the line in the sand for me, right? And this is actually a small day trade I did. I actually entered right on this candle and I sold right around near the top. Actually, it was very good timing for me. I got pretty lucky with this one. It doesn't always work out that well, but in this case it did. But the reason is because, again, from the low back here, we started making higher lows, but pretty much equal highs until we've had that breakout. And then from there, we started making higher highs, higher lows, right? Ultimately, right? After this breakout, this became the strong low or the swing low. And then we ultimately came up for another, swing low over here. And even intraday, we started kind of zigzagging back up like this, you can see. And then the point is the fact that after we made this high over here, right? After we came up to these levels all the way over here, this became to me that swing low for the bulls to hold, the bears to break. And it broke, right? It obviously broke, and then we had a pretty decent flush right back down to these levels all the way from there. 349 all the way back down to like 342. Pretty substantial flush, $7 flush, just like that, right? So that's something you want to watch out for. But on top of that, the daily, you can see, and this is also why I was saying that I think best case scenario is closer to 360, which is that sort of pivot point right here, and also sort of a fair value gap right around this general vicinity, which we actually roughly just slightly entered the territory of, honestly. But definitely could have seen a bit higher, like 357, 358. That was in the cards. But I always take profit, personally speaking, a few dollars lower than what my rough target is. If my target is I say 358 to 360, I'll take targets or profits 355, 356, something like that. I'll always do a few dollars lower than what my target is, right? Because you never really know for sure, to be completely honest with you. And in these kind of situations, it obviously looks pretty good. But yeah, so, the reason I was also telling my members is the fact that, yeah, even though 360 is my main target to the upside after we started breaking those 15-minute candles, we are at the upper end of the channel. Like, it's hard to see much higher than 360, especially with this fair value gap over here. especially considering we would once again get very stretched from the 8 exponential moving average. And I mean, again, we're already pretty stretched on the daily when it comes from like the 21 EMA, or even if I bring out, just the 20-day moving average, or in other words, the market bias, whichever one, the same purpose ultimately. We're stretched from the mean, which is, again, that 20-day moving average or the 21 EMA, roughly the same purpose is served between the two. So to me, if we get even further stretched, it tells me the fact that there's not that more juice left to squeeze, right? That's just the way I look at it personally, right? Obviously, I could be wrong, but that's why, if we do get this push up, it's probably not going to be substantially higher, and I'd be surprised if we see much more than 360 is essentially what I was saying. Again, it doesn't feel like there's that much juice left to squeeze. Where do you find the juice? Where do you refill the juice? Or in this case, I guess the bullish pressure once again, right? Where do you refill it? You refill it at support levels, right? Support levels is where you want to go to find fresh buyers, fresh people to take the stock higher. And that's kind of how this usually works. And it's just, again, it doesn't feel like there's that much juice left to squeeze short term, right? So let's see how this plays out, right? But the final thing I was mentioning to my members is the fact that, and one thing that's also concerning, and why I think, even though 336, 337 is still major support and continues to be major support, I wouldn't be surprised to see it potentially as early as tomorrow maybe, is because of two things. Number one, we're still printing the bearish divergence, right? Even when we went up to these levels over here, we still continued printing bearish divergence on the RSI, price making higher highs, RSI continuing to make lower highs, right? That's a bearish divergence. And take a look at this. Remember this price action back here, like just not that long ago at this point, right? Very, very similar price action, right? Very, very similar. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You can even argue this was 4. I mean, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 pretty much, right? Roughly, right? Very similar price action is what I'm trying to say here. And guess what both of these had in common? They both had a very large bearish divergence into what was a sell-off into the lows over here, which in this case would be pretty much at 336. And again, the price action just looks very, very similar. And the most recent high that it put over here as well, back when we had this sideways action here, was also a fresh high. And if we go to the 15-minute, it also looked very, very similar right here, right? It also looked very, very similar. Like for instance, back here, it was very obvious that this was a resistance point, right? It was very obvious that, my goodness, that this right here was the level to break. And look, what did we get on the 15? Same idea. We got nice 15-minute candles above these levels, and we got some nice price action over here just to get, ultimately slapped it back down pretty aggressively as well. And what did we do on the 15-minute here? Pretty much the exact same thing. Nice price action. Looked like it was turning this area into a resistance into support, and it was, technically speaking, just to get slapped back down very aggressively. Pretty much another liquidity sweep. Exactly the same way it happened back there. Almost exactly the same fashion, on the same attempt, the same divergence on the 1 hour RSI. Like it's almost identical in price action, right? Or at least extremely, extremely close, which to me suggests the fact that, especially if we lose this kind of 342-ish support zone on the 15-minute, on the 1 hour, whatever, like this range right here, you can see if this is lost as early as tomorrow potentially, or Wednesday, tomorrow is Wednesday, or Thursday, I guess you can say, that would not shock me to get a revisit back down to these lows once again. Again, 336, 337, somewhere around there. That, wouldn't shock me at that point, right? So let's, take it one step at a time. But ultimately at this point, honestly, with how many liquidity sweeps we've been getting, it seems like the 1 hour candles is the one we really want to start looking for more, stronger confirmation. So you get actual 1 hour at least candle closures above or below key levels. Again, in other words, if Tesla gets a confirmed 1 hour candle close above, I would say at least like 350 to 352, right? A 1 hour candle. Okay, that's that. Now we're maybe getting a bit, further into this picture over here. Now it's getting a little bit more interesting. Now maybe the bullish pressure can finally happen, right? But again, the MACD still crossed bearish as well. So keep that in mind on top of those bearish divergences on the RSI. But if that can finally happen, then we can finally start maybe potentially going up towards the upper end of the spectrum, sometime next week. And that can finally bring us closer to the 370 to 375 region, because then it wouldn't violate this a rising channel and breaking above it. Because again, yes, you can technically break out of a rising channel and head higher. It doesn't usually happen that way. Like that's pretty rare to see a rising channel for a stock to break to the upside of a rising channel and head higher. Like you just don't see that very often, and probability tells me that the fact that that's just not going to happen, which is also a reason why I don't think this move will go too much higher than high 350s to 360, because that would essentially have to mean that the stock is breaking out of a rising channel. And it's just, that doesn't usually happen. It's very, 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 very rare. Not impossible, but extremely rare, to the point where probability is essentially on your side of it not happening. So that's kind of what I'll be looking for there. Now, of course, on the flip side, if we break down below about 336 roughly and start closing 1 hour candles below about 336, well, then we begin the correction, most likely make our way as to my first target, which will be closer to 325. Worst case scenario, sometime early next week, closer to the bottom end of this channel, this rising channel once again, which depending on how quick it happens, to the 3 teens, somewhere in the 3 teens. Those are my main 2 levels to the downside if that's the path we decide to take. Nobody knows which path we'll take. Nobody knows how this is going to play out. But the one thing I will note, because you can make the similarity like I mentioned over here, is the fact that, but you know, even if it follows a similarity and does something like this, shouldn't it just bounce up higher after that? It could, absolutely it could, but it doesn't have to resolve in the same way as the difference. And the difference here also is the fact that we weren't this extended on the daily when it comes to, like, you know, the moving averages, for instance, because this was happening right over here. We were looking for a beautiful reversal. We were right at the moving averages. It was getting tight and it looked like it was ready to, you know, pounce higher on this bull flag into the EMAs. That's usually one of my favorite setups. If you get a nice massive move up into a bull flag, into the exponential moving averages, more often than not, you know, you're probably going to get a beautiful continuation. The difference here is the fact that, yeah, we can do the same thing roughly, but, you know, we are just more extended now, right? We aren't as tight here with the exponential moving averages acting as support. They're much more spaced apart now, and we're even kind of far away from the 21 over here, you can see, right? So it's not the exact same scenario overall speaking, but in terms of the structural movement within the congestion, it's pretty similar. It just doesn't have to resolve in the same way. Hopefully that makes sense. But again, at the end of the day, levels and price action triumphs all, right? This further solidifies my belief in, you know, divergences, this bearish divergence once again coming in clutch, especially if we end up taking the south route to the downside. Even further will confirm that divergences truly just are that good, honestly. But again, ultimately it comes down to the levels. Again, 1 hour closure above 350 to 352, most likely we have continued upside. As long as, of course, we continue holding this area support naturally, right? Obviously, if we break down below, it's a different story. Or on the flip side, of course, losing about 336, roughly, give or take, on the 1 hour, and closing below that is the opposite, right? Make our way lower. So that's probably the main thing I'll be looking at moving forward. In terms of Tesla stock options flow, let's take a quick look at options flow. Cheddar Flow, by the way, I have a link below if you're interested in using Cheddar Flow. It's a great option service. My link actually gives you a discount if you're interested. A lot of mixed flow throughout the day, actually, a lot of mixed flow throughout the day, but I usually like to look at it towards the end of the day, right? We had more bullish than bearish call flow, obviously, throughout the day, of course, but I like to see what happened towards the end of the day. Honestly, pretty mixed, right? You can see some nice bearish flow towards the end of the day, but also some nice bullish flow towards the end of the day. All weeklies, by the way, all weeklies. So I'm not gonna lie, pretty mixed. It's not really giving me one direction here or another, and that's okay. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But I'm not getting any obvious signs, at least personally speaking, which is why in this case I'll resort to the price action and those levels that, you know, need to break essentially and actually finally truly snap. But the fact that we're getting these liquidity sweeps up here, again, when we got the liquidity sweep down here, we rocketed to the upside. Now we're getting liquidity sweeps here, which tells me the fact that we could just rocket back down here once again, and then we'll have to, you know, very closely monitor the stock down at these levels and see how it reacts, how it holds the level, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, that's kind of what I got for you. So let me know what you think down below. But again, regardless of what happens moving forward, if we make our way to the downside, again, don't forget, that's perfectly fine. A lot of bulls get very upset when you tell them, oh my God, the stock ran up and it's going to go down a little bit. They get very upset. I don't know why. That's exactly what if you're a bull and you want the stock to go higher, you actually want it to go lower first. That's just how things move, right? It's kind of like what happened over here. It didn't just go here and then go sideways for one day and then head up higher. No, it consolidated, headed lower slowly but surely, found essentially new buyers to, you know, lift up the stock and to essentially begin that next momentum, essentially refueling that bullish momentum. Same thing here, guys. Same thing here. Exactly the same thing here. Even if it comes down to the bottom of the channel, even if it comes down to 325 or even 3 teens, same thing. Until proven otherwise, I will just view that as just refueling the bullish pressure to continue higher, closer to 370s. That's just that's just how things move, right? So again, if anything, if you're a bull, you actually want it to go lower. You want it to make these kind of moves. You want it to be a healthy movement to the upside, to the downside first, then to, of course, follow through with further upside. That's what you want the stock to be doing, because that's how things move, and that's what a healthy move looks like. But anyways, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.